On today's episode of the NASM-CPT Podcast with me, Rick Richey, I explore the hamstring muscles. I go through a little bit of the etymology of the hamstrings and then talk about origin and insertion or proximal and distal attachments. I discuss joint actions. What does it do concentrically? What does it do eccentrically? Where does it stabilize? And then at the end, I give a little corrective exercise application for things that you commonly see that can be affected with the hamstring. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe, share with your fitness friends and family, and leave a 5-star review. Now, here's the episode on the overview of the hamstring muscles.
You're listening to the NASM-CPT Podcast with Rick Richey, winner of the Sharecare Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Hey, y'all, and welcome to the NASM-CPT Podcast. My name is Rick Richey, and today we're going to do a little overview of a muscle group. So we're going to do an overview of the hamstring muscles. And I think it's important, right? Because when we review a muscle, we need to understand what we call the functional anatomy of the muscle. But what is functional anatomy? Oh, I like this one. This one, I learned this definition a long time ago, and it's fun just to shoot out. Functional anatomy is the neuromuscular skeletal system's ability to produce, reduce, and dynamically stabilize through multiple planes at various speeds at a safe and coordinated fashion. What? Rewind. Okay, functional anatomy is the neuromuscular skeletal system. So nervous system, muscular system, skeletal system, ability to produce, reduce, and stabilize, dynamically stabilize. But produce, concentric contraction, reduce, eccentric contraction, dynamically stabilize, isometric contraction through multiple planes, sagittal, frontal, transverse, at various speeds, different speeds in a safe and coordinated fashion. And so now we're going to discuss a question that was brought up, a question that says, can you provide content on muscle origin insertions with a focus on the corrective exercise specialist coursework? I'd love to hear you talk about them, Jill W. Here is a follow-up because we did talk about the quadriceps already. So today we're going to talk about the hamstrings. So let's go the etymology of the hamstring. So a hamstring, here we go. Hamstring. We're going to look at this. We know that the hamstring, so it's by definition is the tendon at the back of the knee, but we have them being muscles. But the ham is the bend of the knee, and that goes back to 1560s. The ham is the bend of the knee, and the Old English string is a string, a line, a cord, a thick thread, a rope, a string of a bow, a string of a harp, a tightly stretched or produced tone. This is also where we get this phrase, this word hamstrung. So when we get hamstrung, it's when we are rendered useless or we're brought to weakness or we're thwarted by something. We're hamstrung, and that is an indication of that tendon at the ham, at the back of the knee. When that is torn, it is hamstrung, and then they cannot move anymore. Well, great. Well, we got some muscles to talk about here. There are 3 muscles that we're going to discuss. There are 2 muscles on one side of the leg and 1 muscle, kind of 2, on the other side. So first we're going to talk about the semisisters. The semisisters are semimembranosus and semitendinosus. Those are the semisisters. And then we've got the biceps femoris, but the biceps femoris has a long head and has a short head. So let's first talk about the medial hamstrings. So, which one is the medial hamstring? Have you thought about it? Do you know which one is which? If the biceps femoris or biceps femoris, is that on the medial or lateral side? Semimembranosus, semitendinosus, is that medial or lateral side? So I'll answer it for you. The medial hamstrings are the semisisters. the semisisters, and I'm going to talk initially about the semimembranosus, but they're very similar when it comes to both origin and insertion, or their proximal and distal attachment. So proximal attachment is the ischial tuberosity. Ischial tuberosity, basically your sits bones. That is the ischium. The tuberosity is that bony notch on the sits bones. And that's where they originate from, or what's called the proximal attachment. The insertion is the medial condyle of the tibia. The condyle is that rounded area on the tibia. So that medial condyle is where it attaches to, the distal attachment. And then we got to look and see what this muscle does. Well, it crosses multiple joints. It crosses over the hip joint and it crosses over the knee joint on the medial side. So joint actions. Here we go. It can flex and medially rotate the leg at the knee, so the knee joint, and then it can help to extend the hip. I would also say that probably not in your CES content, but it can also medially rotate the hip a little bit as well. So that is an option. Well, semitendinosus has the same whole business. It's got the proximal attachment being the ischial tuberosity. The insertion is the medial aspect of the proximal part of the tibia, which is a lot to say there, I understand, but medial meaning the inside of the legs at the proximal or top, proximal closer to the center, closer to your body portion of the tibia. So it's on the inside portion at the top of the tibia. Now, the semitendinosus is also part of a complex that I think is pretty cool. It's called the pes-anserine group, or the pes-anserine complex at the knee. And this muscle group, you can keep it like this. So say grace before T. That's your little mnemonic. Say grace before T. So so the S is the sartorius. Sartorius is part of the pes-anserine complex. And remember, sartorius is notorious for being the longest muscle in the body. So sartorius. And then there is the superficial long muscle, this gracilis is the medial thigh muscle. It's one of the adductor muscle. It's the only adductor muscle that crosses not one, but two joints. It crosses two joints. It crosses the hip and it also crosses the knee. And so it kind of joins in with the sartorial tendon, and then they splay out, and then they're joined by another friend. Say grace before, which forget about before. There's not a before muscle. That's just a word. You can't just say grace T. So say grace before T. What is T? The tendinosus, the semitendinosus, which is one of those hamstring muscles on the medial side, one of the semisisters, the semitendinosus. And because these tendons all seem like they're one tendon, but as they get closer to the medial proximal tibia, they spread out, making it look like a bit of a webbed foot of a creature of some sort, perhaps a goose. Hence the name pes-anserine complex. Pes is foot, like we get a pes planus, right? We have the plantar side of the foot, plantar, planus, pes, foot. So the pes-anserine, anserine is what? Anserine is a goose. It's goose foot. It is the goose foot complex. When people tell me, they go, oh, anatomy is crazy, it's so difficult. It might be now, but can you imagine if you like lived back in the day when they're coming up with anatomy and they're like, hey, what is that? I'm like, I don't know, it looks like a goose foot. And we're like, let's call it that. Let's call it goose foot. And so there we are. We've got goose foot. We've got the gastrocnemius, the belly leg muscle. We've got, you go through these muscles and they're just such, I don't know, like mundane names. And for us, when we learn them in a different language, it's like, oh, how fancy it is. It ain't fancy. It's goosefoot complex. That's a goosefoot. So which of the semi-muscles is part of the pes anserine or the goosefoot complex? Say grace before T-tendinosus, semitendinosus. All right, we'll get to the other ones in just a moment. But first, this episode of the NASM-CPT Podcast is brought to you by NASM-1, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations, access to free CEUs, and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM-1. All right. Semimembranosus, semitendinosus. Well, what does that muscle do? Same thing. Semitendinosus, same joint action, semimembranosus. It does knee flexion. It does knee internal rotation. It can do hip extension. It can do a little bit of hip internal rotation. Depending how far the leg is out away from you in abduction, it can probably assist in adduction as well. But again, let's not focus on that. If you're focused on the corrective exercise content, I'm giving you just a little bit more. So what's next? The biceps femoris or the biceps femoris. And here's the thing. So let's talk etymology, right? So we've got biceps. And so the biceps means bi is two and seps is head. So it's the two heads or the two-headed muscle on what? The femoris or the femur. So it is the two-headed hamstring muscle on the femur, the biceps femoris. All right, so we got the same origin place or the same proximal attachment, but then it goes down and inserts into the head of the fibula. The other is attached to the head of the medial proximal portion of the tibia. The tibia is the big bone in the lower leg. The fibula is the smaller of the two bones in the lower leg. Remember, a small eye is a fib. So the hamstring attaches to the small lyre of your lower leg, the fibula. And so let's talk about what it can do in its joint actions. Joint actions, yes. So if it crosses a joint, it works at that joint. So what does it do? Well, it can flex at the knee. It can laterally rotate the knee, and it can extend the thigh at the hip joint. It also has the ability to do external rotation at the hip joint. But then that's only the long head that crosses the hip. So only the long head of the biceps femoris can actually do that. The short head, its origin, same insertions area or distal attachment, but the origin, the proximal attachment, is the linea aspera of the lateral supracondylar line. Ooh. That is fun to explore. What is the linea aspera? A linea aspera is the line on the posterior side of the femur. Actually, some of the quadricep muscles attach to that. Its origin of the vastus lateralis is also along that linea aspera. It's like a long line that runs down. It's kind of almost like a slightly fin-shaped on the posterior side of the femur. And then supracondylar line, remember, condyle of the femur are the rounded areas of the femur. So just above the rounded area of the femur. And then it crosses over the knee joint and attaches to the head of the fibula. So it can flex, it can laterally rotate the knee, flex the knee, but it does not cross the hip. So it has no joint actions that happen at the hip. I'm going to tell you a crazy story. So recently I went with a family and we did a cruise. And so we're on the ship and I don't know, I feel like maybe I was cramped up or something, but I feel like I got plenty of electrolytes and calories on that trip. It was all inclusive. So your boy ate. And here I am, something happened where my biceps femoris or biceps femoris got a crazy cramp. So one of those just gnarly Charlie horses that was taking place, and I couldn't stretch it. All I could do is straighten my knee, but because it was the short head of the biceps fem, I could flex my hip all I wanted and it would not stretch. Could not stretch. It was awful. It's awful when you can't stretch out of a cramp. The only thing I could do is straighten my knee, and that is the most stretch that muscle was going to get. And I was in pain, and my family, we're all in the same bunk room, cabin, whatever they are on a ship, and they are concerned, and I'm trying. Oh, your daddy is trying not to cry in front of his family. But it was awful, and I'm just like, give me a second. I'm trying to stretch it. Let me breathe into it. My daughter, God bless her, came over. She's like, you want me to massage it? I was like, no, I just want to be left alone. And so she gladly did. But I was like, can you give me a bottle or something, a water bottle where I can put under it and apply pressure to it? And I did, and it kind of worked a little bit, and I just had to wait for the cramp to go away. But I say this, the biceps femoris short head, all I could do is extend the knee to stretch that muscle. I wish it was the long head. I could go into hip flexion and stretch it more, but no, wasn't happening. So what muscles we look at functional anatomy, neuromuscular skeletal system's ability to produce, reduce, and dynamically stabilize. So what are we producing? Producing is the concentric contraction. So all of these muscles do knee flexion. That's kind of their thing. The hamstring muscles do knee flexion. All of them except the short head of the biceps femoris does hip extension, right? So that means that they also all decelerate knee extension and they decelerate hip flexion. They accelerate, they concentrically contract, and they will do knee flexion and hip extension. They eccentrically decelerate knee extension and hip flexion. But they have some rotational forces here. The the biceps femoris, short and long head, will also do lateral rotation at the knee. And people do this a lot, actually. It turns out one of the more common compensations you see is when people are doing, let's say, for instance, leg curls. Sometimes you see it in leg extensions, but like leg curls a lot more. Or when people are doing squats, or when people, and the reason feet turn out during squats is totally different than it does when people do leg curls. Let's just stick with leg curls. So when they're doing leg curls, you'll see people doing, whether they're lying down prone and curling or they're doing the seated leg curls, the feet tend to turn out. Well, that is preferentially focusing on the biceps femoris muscles. So the biceps femoris are the muscles that not only do lateral rotation at the hip, they also do lateral rotation at the knee. So as you curl back and the knees stay straight ahead and the feet will turn out, that's the biceps femoris really taken over in that exercise. They're really taken over. So what's not happening? Well, what's not happening is that muscle's overacting, and even though the semi-sisters are also contracting, they're not contracting enough to stabilize the knee when it comes to lateral rotation. So generally what I would do is I would go internal rotate at the hip, try to internally rotate at the knee, which you can't really do while your leg is straight. But as you curl back, try to get your toes to touch each other. Your heels are apart, your toes touch each other. You have to lighten the weight. You are going to have to lighten the weight. And it is going to feel like a dog. It will be challenging. The problem is most people will say, that's okay, I'd rather lift more weight. Well, you're going to hit a point where you just can't do any more weight with the curl because really you have way too much biceps femoris. You're not asking enough of the other muscles. Get the other muscles involved. Get them involved. You do a few of these, what I call diamond curls, where the heels are apart, toes are together, your knees are knocked towards each other, and do a few curls lighter weight, and then take the weight back up and try to do some hamstring curls again and see if your feet stay straight. I guarantee they will either stay straight or be a lot straighter than they were when you were doing them before, because you have done this activation of the medial hamstring muscle. So if you see this as a corrective exercise specialist, right, they're doing the curls, the feet turn out, do some medial hamstring activation. What you may also want to do is focus on stretching. Do a little stretch for the biceps femoris. Well, how do I do that? Let's talk about what these do eccentrically again. So I know that to stretch would be the eccentric joint action. So I need to straighten my knee out. I need to flex my hip, but I also need to internally rotate my hip. I'm going to say this. That is a good way to get a gnarly sciatic nerve stretch. And a sciatic nerve, first of all, nerves don't like to be stretched. They don't like it. They don't care for it. And so your muscles are going to contract just to try to protect you. So one of the things I have people do is do an active stretch instead of a static stretch, so that you are actively stretching through that range of motion. So a little bit of, lying back on your back. So you're face up, and then go 90-90 with your knee. Your knees flex to 90 degrees, your hips flex to 90 degrees, and then slightly adduct and internally rotate the leg you want to stretch, straighten the other leg out, put it on the ground, and then just do knee extensions. And that is a great way to do an active stretch for the lateral hamstring muscles, the biceps femoris. So now, lateral hamstring muscles, do some stretching. The medial hamstring muscles, do some activation, get back up there and do those hamstring curls. Guarantee feet will be close to straight, if not completely straight, or at least they'll be better than they were, because now you're focusing on the imbalances that happen. This is why we learn what we learn and why we do what we do, so that we can bring balance to the force. All right, y'all, thanks for listening. And thanks to my producer, Eric Sorensen. Like, subscribe, share with your fitness friends and family, and leave a 5-star review. If you want to reach out to me, hit me up. You can do so on Instagram at dr.rickrichy, or email me, rick.richey@nasm.org. Y'all keep inspiring people to fitness. Thanks for listening. This has been the NASM-CPT Podcast.